parking and or the elimination of free parking. And I mean, that's right from the RCWs that it's passed right on to us. So that's part of our suggestion there. And I hope that we don't ever have an employer that is going to take that one up particularly, because there are others that are available. We do have one employer that is subject to this code, and I'm glad to see that they're, so far as I can tell, very happy to comply with it. There also is money that's coming in, of course, for paying for some of the mandates. But it still is very troubling code, as my colleagues have mentioned. There is one part of the code that I object to, and that is on page 11, which would be section 1035.100 D4, which is violations. And it's considered a violation under this code to failure to self-identify as an affected employer. So if you hire more than 100 employees, or if you have less than 75, first off, you won't even know that you're potentially infected. And then if all of a sudden you hire 50 employees, then you're subject to the code. But it's your responsibility under this code to identify to the city that, hey, by the way, you're under the code. And is there any way that we can take that out?
I don't know if that's a state mandate or not. I suspect it probably is.
Okay.
It's in here.
Okay. Because my understanding is that it would, morally speaking, it would be the responsibility of the city to identify to the company that since we know the laws and it's our responsibility to enforce them on some level, rather than for them to concern themselves with scouring the code looking for something to go start complying with now that they hired 50 more employees. Those are my main comments, and I appreciate your patience.
I think we could certainly, on the last item, RJ, I think we can, doesn't completely solve the issue itself, but in the annual mailing that we put out to business owners for business permit, business license renewals, we could certainly put something in there that on an annual basis reminds any of those who may actually read the letter that we send with it, that provision is in there, and also at the same time, make sure they know that there are some resources available to them as well if they get into that situation.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
while this is being mandated on us to pass and to be actively involved in, one of the aspects of this that is not mandated on us is the dollar amount that the businesses are penalized. So I am making an amendment to this to make the penalties that are leveled against the businesses who violate the CTR at $1 per violation, and also for subsequent violations, $1 a day as well. They may mandate this on us, but I would like to take the teeth out of it.
Second? I know we had discussion from the folks that we had, both from the state and from the city of Vancouver, who are, if we sign the interlocal agreement, who are administering the program, that they would certainly, that would most likely raise some eyebrows if we've got something that literally takes the teeth out of even the minimal provisions that are here for violations of the policy.
Okay. I would like to side on err on the side of our businesses, and then if they do have issues, then they can bring them back to us, and then we can address them again. But I think in passing this and having the amendment added to it, I think that it would send the correct message that while we don't like your program, we will enforce it, but we are not going to tackle our businesses with $100 per violation charges and $200 per subsequent violations.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
would not this be a good opportunity to open the conversation with the state? If they came back to us?
If they even have, that was going to be my next question. Don, do you see any potential problems with this?
Unless it's the amount that's mandated, and John says he's checked it out and it's not. The $100 per violation, the subsequent penalties of $250 per each violation, those aren't mandated. I think you can set them for whatever amount you want.
Mr. Mayor? According to our interlocal agreement, there is no mandate in the interlocal agreement that I'm aware of setting penalties. In the RCWs, I looked for that specifically myself recently, and it does not list the amount. It says that we have to set the rate for the penalties. One thing I would like to clarify is that as far as the actual exact motion, if I understand correctly, we're moving to strike $100 and insert $1, and strike $250 and insert $1.
Correct.
Exactly.
And both of those are in 1035-110B3.
Very good. And I am in favor of this amendment.
Paul?
I just want to observe that the only employer in the city that this applies to likes the program. They don't think of this as a burden. And the real impetus as to why we need to do this is that if we don't, then we no longer qualify for state aid for street improvements. That's the stick. It's a big stick. Those grants are all competitive. There are somewhere between 3 and 10 times as many grants in a typical year as there are funding for them. Your likelihood of being funded is heavily dependent upon how well you play the game. It's clear from sitting on Budget Committee that we do not have and are not going to have anytime soon the money that we need to do street work or sidewalks or any of the other things completely out of our own pocket. We need the state help. We need the help from the county on CDBG grant, Community Development Block Grant, and the various other sources of funding. I am deeply concerned that by effectively eliminating the penalties, that we put ourselves at the end of the line in competing for these grants.
I'd like to also just add to that, that actually our ability to receive grants from the state will not be impeded based on what's inside the document. It is whether or not we pass the document. And that was what was clearly stated at our last meeting with them as well. But my concern with these penalties is not necessarily our current one business that applies to this. It's the future businesses. It's the ones who may be looking to come here, who may have 200, 300 employees or more. By doing this, and if we are able to keep it on the books, we will have one more leg up on everyone else in the county. So that is my reasoning for this amendment. If it is something that they come back and say, this is a deal breaker, there is, so on and so forth, we can have that discussion then. But I think right now, this would be the appropriate time to send this message.